Our next speaker is Ms. Amina Sharmadou. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Biomedical Engineering from Wright State University and is currently pursuing a master's degree in the same field with a focus in medical device design and development. For the past few years, she has been an engineering math teaching assistant and lecturer at Wright State University and Sinclair Community College. She is also involved with on-campus organizations like the Biomedical Engineering Society, as well as helping pioneer the Dayton chapter of a Columbus-based Dawah group called Ask a Muslim. Please help me in welcoming Ms. Amina Sharmadou.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So since I'm a student, I decided to take this a little bit of an academic approach. So I looked at the word coexistence and decided, well, what does coexistence mean to us? And so I actually ended up finding two definitions for the word, which was interesting since we tend to just think this word means one definition. And the first definition that I found was, coexistence is living peacefully with other nations, religions, etc., despite fundamental disagreements. And the second definition I found was that coexistence describes societies in which diversity is embraced for its positive potential, equality is actively pursued, and interdependence between different groups is recognized. And so just looking at those two definitions, you guys probably noticed the tone difference between the first definition versus the second definition. I felt like the first definition had more of a tone of tolerance, whereas the second definition had more of a welcoming aspect to the diversity involved. And when we're thinking about the first definition, the tolerance that I was talking about was, it mentions the fact that there's differences as far as the nations and the religions, but the word despite kind of gives this negative appeal. And so you're thinking of it as two different entities. One entity is in one row, the other one's in another row. So long as they never cross paths, of course they're gonna live peacefully, which is not the reality of situations when you're looking at coexistence. The second one, however, it says things like diversity is embraced for its positive potential, which automatically we're reading that and we feel a lot better about the word coexistence. And so looking at this topic as far as Islam and American culture, we have to think about it in the sense that if one word can have two different sides to a story, that's going to be the same object as far as Islam and American culture. And so when we're thinking about the perception of Islam in America today, we've touched base upon it, but we all understand that the images that are being painted across for our religion, it's tainted by what's been going on in the news and what people are throwing around in the media. And the media, Western media itself is its own thing, but then now we have political figures coming up here talking about our religion, trashing the religion, and nobody's really stopping that. And so we have to kind of take that approach, but we can't let that be the reason why we separate ourselves from society. And so my personal opinion is that Islam and American culture, they have a symbiotic relationship. So they're living off of each other, and that's how they can continue to survive. And for example, when we go out in the world, yes, we're American, we're all American, but we don't forget about the fact that we're also Muslim. And so we use that background as sort of our driving force in how we live our life. How do we behave? How do we act in public? The way that we portray ourselves is very important because people are looking at us to see who Muslims are, what is their religion telling them to do. So if we go out there and completely forget about our religious background, then they're going to assume that that's how everybody is, and how easy is it for them to be painting a picture when 5 people do something wrong. But if we're all doing the wrong thing, it's going to get a lot worse. And so I think what our job is our biggest thing is that we have to show the world that Islam and American culture can coexist. Right now, we have a whole industry that works against us. It's not in the sense that everybody is out to get us, but there is a few people who are doing a pretty good job at painting this paintbrush of all of us being bad people, all of us are terrorists, And it's so easy for people who don't know a Muslim to just assume, yeah, that's what it is. I mean, before, with all this media craziness, we go to the media to seek the news that's happening in the world. So you have to think about it in the sense that some people aren't very good at critical thinking. And so what they see in the news, that's exactly what they absorb. They believe it, and that's what they're going to believe unless you bring them a different approach. And so our goal is that we need to fix those problems, but before we think about the large scale where we want to change the world overnight, we have to start off with what can I do, what can our community do, and then what can the larger community do, and then what can we do as an ummah. And when we think about it as a smaller sense, it's an easier thing to fix the small scale, which will hopefully propagate into fixing the larger scale, which is what we want to kind of aim our goals towards. When we come out with one message, when we start out with something small and it starts going through to the rest of the community and then again the rest of the nation, that small message that might have started with a couple people becomes the one message that we want to show the world. And if we all come out with the same story, it's going to be pretty hard for those people who are trying to go against us to keep their grounds, because we're doing everything that they're saying that we don't do. So when we counter their argument with who we really are, it's going to be a better thing for us and then hopefully for the rest of the world. And so when I mention problems within ourselves, they're problems that I kind of bunched up into 4 different categories. One being pessimism, lack of knowledge, lack of confidence, and then fear. And all 4 of these problems, they work together to create a massive problem. I mean, you can't really separate one without having to mention the others. And so when we're looking at pessimism, what I mean by that is when we're watching TV, we're all kind of, it's just human nature to look at everything that's going on and just kind of give up, have that sad feeling like, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just ride this out? That's the pessimism that we definitely need to kind of start moving away from. If we're pessimistic, then the kids that are also watching the TV, if they see that you're pessimistic, they look up to you. So if you're pessimistic, they're going to grow up as pessimists, and we're all just not going to be very happy people, and we're not going to do anything to try to change our current situation. And as far as kind of getting away from the pessimism, just looking at our lack of knowledge. I'm not talking about lack of knowledge in the sense that we don't know much about our deen, not in that sense, but as Sister Karen mentioned, the fact that a lot of people don't know the history of Islam in the United States. And so when you're hearing all these things about people saying we don't belong here and all of that, it's almost believable if you don't understand that we've existed here just as long as America has existed here. And so having that knowledge of knowing that we belong here just as much as anybody else, it kind of feeds into preventing the confidence that a lot of us have a problem with as well. When you don't have confidence to go out there and speak about your religion, in general, just having that confidence, knowing about your religion, knowing that you belong here, it's also going to be a lot harder for somebody to tell you you don't belong here, or you guys are foreigners, and they'll just ostracize us as a group if we don't know anything about our own religion. And I think that's a common problem when we don't know much about our religion. Everybody kind of just stays back and lets the people who do know about it talk about it, when really it's not, in a sense that you don't have to come out and know every single thing about a religion, but you know the basics. I mean, you know how you're supposed to behave, you know what you're supposed to do in your day-to-day life. So those are the type of things that can keep you informed enough in order to kind of portray the correct message that you need to the people around you. And then taking those 3, so lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, and pessimism, taking those 3 factors, all of those kind of boil into fear. So, and I'm not talking about them being afraid of us, I'm talking about us being afraid of them. So when you're watching the TV and you're seeing all this madness and you know so many people believe it, it's easy for us to kind of fall into that bubble of being afraid to leave our houses, afraid to be wearing the hijab, afraid to be doing things that show that we are Muslim or that we might be different than the rest of them. And I think that's exactly what they want. And so if you are going to do that, if you are going to go out there and kind of forget about your religion because they want you to, you're feeding into what they want. And so our biggest thing is that we need to remember, once you give in to their fear, you're essentially giving your heart over to the enemy. So you want to protect your heart, and to do that, you want to make sure that when things like this happen, don't use it as a way to kind of forget about your religion, but instead use it as a way to kind of keep your head up. You know, you go out there, you're representing your religion, don't change that just because bad things are being thrown about you in the media. And so how do we fix this problem? So first thing that what we don't want to do is we don't want to give up and accept our current condition. We all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to change our condition unless we change it ourselves. And so you don't want to sit there and just assume that some savior is going to come and fix all these problems. If you want something to change, you have to physically change it. We can pray, we can make dua, but that won't be enough. We have to put something into action. I can pray that I'm going to pass an exam, but if I don't study for my exam, it's going to be a lot harder for Allah to see that I actually care enough to pass that exam. So it's kind of the same idea, just applied on a different basis. And then we also want to make sure that fear doesn't come between us and our religion. So not just us versus society, but us versus your spiritual self. A lot of the times when you're seeing all this thing in the news, some people who are already conflicted about their religion are going to just increase in that side because they see all this in the news, they believe it, and they're like, well, maybe I'm not in the right religion. Maybe everything that they're saying about our religion is actually true. So we don't want that to happen in our societies. And so moving on from what we should not do, we want to think about, well, what is it that we can do? So what we want to do is we want to build from the inside out. So we want to start from the small scale, like I said, and think about how is it that we can educate our community. So alhamdulillah, we have this new masjid, and we've started kind of mobilizing, and I think the new masjid breathed a breath of fresh air for the community. There's a lot more traffic, which is really nice, and so I think we use this opportunity to kind of start propelling into making sure that we're educating our community, not just about religious topics, but also lifestyle topics. And so we're hoping that that's the way that we're going to continue with the rest of this year, and so in future events as well. But when we start educating our community, that's going to start translating into the children as well, and the youth. Empowering our youth is probably one of the most important things, just because they're the ones that are going to carry on the generations to come. So once we're educated and we're empowering our youth, it'll just keep on going, and they'll know what's the right way to teach the religion and how to relay the information onto the next generation. Being able to teach our kids and even ourselves about the history of Islam, it's going to build the confidence in them to just be able to, anytime anybody comes and tells them you don't belong here, they can easily know how to respond, just because they know now that they actually do belong. And it's all in the teaching, it's all in the education. Once you educate everybody, all of us are going to be empowered and going to have the confidence to be able to go out and say and do what we can to protect the image of Islam, but as well spread Islam. So another way that we can do it, besides just working between ourselves and our community, we have to think about, well, how do we strengthen the ties between ourselves and the outside world? If we continue to just stay in this bubble where we're only hanging out with Muslims, we're only doing things with Muslims, everybody from the outside is going to see that. They're going to see, well, there's always a wall between the rest of the Muslims and us. But we need to get more involved in the sense that we do community charity events for the community, inviting other faiths, not just always like doing things with Muslimin, and not saying that that's bad, like having events for just Muslims, but we need to get more involved with the rest of the community so that they see, oh, I was at a charity event the other day and there was a Muslim there, and there was a Jewish person there, and there was a Christian person there. When they see more of us with them, they're not going to create that us versus them. We're all going to be kind of on the same side. And the thing is, we are in a community where we have a lot of Muslims, alhamdulillah, mashallah, but other communities, there might just be one or two families. And so how do we reach out to those members? And the way that we do that is, like they were saying, we start off with our Dayton community, but then we need a Southwest Muslim community, and we need to start propagating that, and eventually that will kind of just translate into the rest of the country, and hopefully that will improve our image as a whole, not just within ourselves, but also what the world sees of us. So in conclusion, we know that our biggest conflict today is the identity crisis. We know that there's so many people telling us Islam and American culture, they can't work together. And so our biggest goal is, how do we fight that wedge? How do we fight that wedge that they continue to try to push between who we are and where we live? And our biggest thing, just to kind of wrap up what I had just said, Our biggest thing is we start with ourselves, we educate ourselves, we build on ourselves, we move it out as a smaller scale to larger scale, and hopefully that will translate over around the country and then to the world, and that'll just give us a better appeal from the outside, and then hopefully we can not see people like Donald Trump be able to come up and talk about us the way that they can freely. So thank you for that.